My name is Torika. I was born in Hobart, in Tasmania, another island. My father is from Silvervo. His mother is from Ravi Ravi village in Benga, and his father is from Nangara in Ono. So the first few years of my life was spent between his village in Silvervo and between my mum's home in Tasmania. And we lived in those two spaces for, the first 3 or 4 years of my life. So my idea of home is challenging. I don't really feel rooted or grounded in one space. My mother and I moved around and lived in about 10 different houses by the time I was 10 years old. So I sort of think of Hobart as home, but over the years that's been shifting as I start to make my own journey through life. So I didn't really have an academic trajectory when I started. My parents both finished high school and that was it. And so when I grew up, after my parents separated and I grew up with mum in Hobart, education was always really important and it was always emphasised, but there kind of wasn't a model of how to move through those spaces in any kind of higher education space. I do remember mum saying to me quite a bit, though, that I'd have to work twice as hard as everyone else to get ahead. I think these kinds of narratives, young children of colour particularly hear a lot, and I don't think it's very productive. I think it puts a lot of unnecessary stress on young people. But that's another story. And there was this kind of idea that I should always have a backup plan, because my interests always lied in the creative arts, in performing and singing and dancing and any kind of artistic pursuits. So this idea that I kind of had to have a backup plan was always kind of drummed into me at an early stage. So ending up in higher education was kind of never in a part of the plan. So I'm what's called a first in family. So that means I'm the first in my mum and my dad's side to go to university. I think for anybody navigating that space, navigating university is always really challenging, but particularly so if there isn't anyone around you in your close network of family or friends that is able to kind of help you in that space. And so I didn't go straight from year 12 into university. I actually, I was playing in a few different bands. I played bass guitar, I was in a grunge band, and I finished year 12, we moved to Melbourne. This is a kind of a really normal narrative for people in Tasmania. It's called leaving Hobart and going to what's called the mainland, like everybody does it. And so I did that for a little while. I came home when the band broke up and started to kind of reinvent myself. And I thought, people kind of lost expectation that I could actually do anything successful. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to show you, I'm going to go to university and see how this works out. And I remember mum saying to me, because I was struggling with all the paperwork, and she said, look, if you can't even fill out the forms, maybe you shouldn't even be there. I thought, oh, okay, right, I can do this. I remember feeling really, really lost. The first few years, or the first year that I was there, the first couple of semesters, I didn't even know that there was like a printing lab where I could print out my essays and stuff. So I would handwrite everything and drive my lecturers mad. I still didn't print out anything in my first year there. But what did happen in that first year was that I was able to set up a darkroom in the bathroom of our flat, so where I could process and print my own photographs. And so in this first year of university at Tas University, I was studying a bit of sociology and a bit of political science, Aboriginal Australia it was called at the time, and I was mixing it with a bit of fine art, so following up on that love of photography that I'd developed in high school. So having access to that stuff at home was amazing, and where I really kind of developed my craft. But the other subjects weren't resonating with me as much. The curriculum didn't really speak to me until there was this opportunity to write my own essay question in a sociology class. And it was the early 90s. I was very much into hip-hop culture and hip-hop music. And I wrote an essay about the LA riots called No Justice, No Peace, handwritten, of course. And I submitted it, and I felt really good about it because I'd been able to write something that actually resonated with me, that I felt really strong and passionate about. And I kind of didn't care, if my lecturer appreciated it or not. So I handed it in, and a couple of weeks later I got the essay handed back to me, and it had a big D negative on it, and a big circle, just in case I kind of missed that it was a minus. So I was, flipping through. That was just it. I was over university. Clearly I wasn't supposed to be there. Flipping through the course guide to see how I could unenroll, and then I found the marking guide, which was P for pass, C for credit, D for distinction. So suddenly I had this kind of boost in confidence. And I realised that the reason that I'd written something that was okay was because I felt really strongly about it. So I kind of, at this stage, I realised that that particular university wasn't able to, at that time, mix what I wanted to do in humanities and visual arts. So I did a bit of research. The internet was brand new at that stage, and found that there was a university that could balance and allow me to, explore my shared love of history and sociology and African American studies, as well as doing things like animation and video and photography. So I moved to Melbourne in the late 90s, and away from home, there was a small group of friends, obviously all the Tasmanians who move to Melbourne, we all find each other. And the library really became my safe space. It's where I've always kind of felt like there are just endless possibilities, and I can kind of write my own and read my own way through my own narrative. And I really, really love that about libraries and book collections. And so even though this new degree was kind of, I could see myself working out the balance of all of these things that I wanted to do, the curriculum still wasn't resonating with me. I was really frustrated that there were artists that weren't being discussed, and that there were histories and theories that just weren't relevant to me and my lived experience. So I would start doing things like writing my own essay questions any chance that I got, or any chance that I got to, do my own presentation. I'd talk about photographers like Carrie Mae Weems, Lorna Simpson, Destiny Deacon, Brooke Andrews, people that really spoke to me and my sense of identity, power, these dynamics of race and gender and representation. And it was finding these texts, finding these artists that helped me to kind of direct my own practice into becoming, working out my way of understanding my relationship to Fiji and my Fijian identity. And at the end of my third undergraduate year, I was given an honours scholarship. So in that year, I was able to really look at what it is, this multiracial sort of subjectivity, and this idea of existing between two homes in this kind of liminal space, a third space. And so I started travelling back to Fiji a lot after that, back to my dad's village in Suvovo, and connecting with my cousins and my aunties and my uncles. And that was the beginning of like a yearly trip back. And I'm pleased to say that I've been able to take my own family, my own children back. So after that, after kind of dragging myself through an undergraduate and honours, I went on to do a master's at Monash, and then the PhD last year, which I finally finished after like 10 years. It took way too long. But what I can say is that Fiji has always been it's been central to my practice. I'm really kind of less interested in looking at the impact of colonialism, and I'm more interested in how we see ourselves now. What this Genda project is about, this idea of writing our own, making our own archives and writing our own stories, and what Apeta put together before this presentation speaks so clearly to me, and what my practice is also about. I'm really interested in looking at how we see ourselves and thinking about who we are without having to always centre colonial contact as that starting point. So whether I'm making work about Fiji's nuclear veterans, or learning about the sacredness of Fijian hair, or writing about private security workers, Fiji is always at the centre of my art, and it's my way of learning, experiencing, and knowing. Now, I'm the first to acknowledge that I come to this from an outsider's perspective. So I never claim to speak on behalf of Fijians, but I also am happy to kind of like own this position and the location that I speak from, because I just don't know any other way. And I think that authenticity debates are really toxic and unproductive, and I don't buy into that. But what I've learned along the way is that I'm really, really motivated by this idea that if we don't tell our own stories, then who will? I really think we need to make our own archives, both public and private, the public stuff that we see in institutions, but also those Instagram accounts. That is, who we are. That is our lived experience. I think it's really important to find connections where you can. I think my experience of university would have been completely different if I had found a group of Pacific students to connect with. I think those kind of connections are just invaluable, but also mentors who can help you. Dr. Teresia Teiua was a very strong influence in my life as a colleague. What I want to say is that the university may not look like you, but always know that you have a right to be there. Whenever I'm working at an open day and I'm talking to parents, I remember what it felt like to be that lost kid, that first in family, and I really try to make the institution less intimidating. The tertiary education is such a huge privilege, and it's an enormous burden for many families, financially, emotionally. So my experience means that I never take this for granted. Finally, I want to say to hold on to the spaces and the people that make you feel validated, and who make you feel like you are home. And this is what I try to do in my practice, to nurture spaces where communities of colour can feel welcome, acknowledged, and validated. I do this in my home for my 3 daughters, in my classrooms, and in my creative practice when I can. Thank you.